What is a realistic win-loss record for the Panthers in 2025? I'll answer that question among other listener questions on this weekly Friday mailbag edition of Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and yes, of course, Friday, your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for watching the show right here on YouTube and listening wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Be sure to follow me, Julian Council, over on Twitter and Blue Sky at Julian Council, because on Fridays, like today, I'm answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions. The way to get those questions in is by either adding me or DMing me over on Twitter or adding me over on Blue Sky at Julian Council. The weekly Friday mailbag is back once again, and we're looking at the Panthers' upcoming schedule and what the realistic win-loss record could be. We're looking at Tetairoa McMillan and Mike Evans, the comparison there. And then there's still seems to be some thirst from Panther fans out there for the Panthers to trade for a big fish edge rusher. All that coming up here on this weekly Friday mailbag edition of the show. Starting off, though, with the schedule that came out finally on Wednesday. The schedule dates, that is, we've known the opponents since January, but we finally know when the Panthers will be playing them this upcoming fall during the 2025 regular season. And Liam, he asked, looking at the 2025 opponents, what is a realistic record prediction for next season? Now, Liam asked me this question back in January, and I told him, look, man, appreciate the question. I don't know, because I have no idea who's going to be on the roster at this point in time. The Panthers have just come off of a great second half of the season for Bryce Young. There was encouragement with the offense, but defensively, it was a train wreck. And not knowing who was going to be on that defense this upcoming season, I could not answer that question back then. So he circled back this week with the schedule being out and being past the draft, being past free agency, and wants my answer. Now, I will still say this to you, Liam. Let's understand that last year, on August 22nd, that's when the Panthers traded Michael Barrett, the 7th round pick from 2024, to Seattle for Mike Jackson, who ended up playing and starting in all 17 games last season. So one of the most important pieces to this Panthers defense wasn't even on the roster until August 22nd. Today is May 16th. There's still plenty of moves that they are going to make and probably need to make to get a better idea of what this team is truly capable of. Well, you look at right now, they've addressed receiver, they've added to the running back room. Certainly, they've done a ton defensively, need to do more, but this is a roster you can look at right now, and you pretty much know this is pretty much what it's going to be, although there are changes that will happen, and we'll see how it plays out. So just want to put that out there. But looking at the schedule, we talked about this the other day. I look at those first 4 games as obviously not ideal that you have to go 3 of the first 4 on the road. But if it's going to be 3 of the first 4 on the road, let it be at Jacksonville, let it be at Arizona, let it be at New England, and have a home game against Atlanta. And after that, that's a 5-game stretch, a home against Miami, home against Dallas, at the Jets, home against Buffalo, at Green Bay, that I believe is the toughest sustained stretch of the season before you get to week 12 and week 13 at San Francisco on Monday Night Football, and then home on a short week versus the Los Angeles Rams, 2 teams from the NFC West who have realistic, in my opinion, Super Bowl aspirations this upcoming season in 2025. So you look at those first 4 games, trying to break it up like that. I think you got to find a way to win week 1 at Jacksonville. Like, get off to a good start. You don't want to have your backs against the wall already heading into week 2 on the road against the Arizona team, who I think will still be fairly competitive like they were last year, as Carolina ended their hopes going to the playoffs a year ago. And it wasn't going to happen for Arizona, even if they had one out. That was always going to be LA. But still, Carolina's going to have a tough contest out there against a team that they have owned recently, but a team that is ascending. But Jacksonville, you got to win that game. Their defense was also terrible last year. Plenty of questions about Trevor Lawrence. I'm excited to see what Travis Hunter is going to be able to do in that game, how they utilize him, but still his NFL debut. You got to beat Jacksonville. You just have to do that. Arizona. If there's going to be a game that they lose, that should be the one, because quite honestly, I think the Cardinals are going to be a better team than the Jags, then the Falcons, and then the Patriots. Now, maybe not better than Atlanta, but we'll see. I mean, Atlanta, that's a home game. Your first home game, you got to win that one. And then at New England, like, find a way to win that game. Now, I did say that also, if you're going to lose, I would rather it be at New England, because you don't want to lose a conference game, as that can play out when it comes to tiebreakers for a potential wild card later on in the season. But like 3-1, they got to get the 3-1, 2-2 at the worst. But say they get the 3-1, then I think you're off to obviously a pretty good start. Then after that, that Miami, that Dallas, that Jets, that Buffalo, that Green Bay stretch, 2-3. 2-3 at worst, man. That's what you got to take. I mean, I think 3-2 probably the best case scenario if we're being realistic here for a team that, I mean, win total wise, FanDuel has them at 6.5. So you asked me, what is the realistic record prediction? Well, the realistic record prediction, according to Vegas, is 7-10 or 6-11. Now, that's not what anyone wants to hear. It would be an improvement upon the 5-12 season that Carolina had last year, but the way that they were trending, and momentum doesn't always carry over from year to year. Certainly Detroit, who got off like a horrible start a couple years ago and then went on to win like 7 of their final game, I think 6 out of the last 7 games or whatever it was. They carry that momentum over to the next season as a team that made it to the NFC title game. And they've carried it over last year where they were the top seed in the NFC. So it is possible for momentum to carry on, but we'll see whether that's going to happen in Carolina. And there was so much negative stuff also defensively to where, yeah, you kind of want to reset a lot of this roster. So that would be a simple answer. But looking at it, they go 2-3 in that stretch, and they're already 3-1. You're talking about 5-4. Or if they get the higher end of that, that's 3-2, and say they were 2-2, again, that's 5-4. So like you're looking at hopefully 5-4, 4-5 at worst when you're there through the first 9 weeks of the season. And then you're at home against New Orleans. That's got to be a win. So let's say 5-5 at that point in time, or you're 6-4. And then you're going to Atlanta. There have been tough games in Atlanta throughout the past. I know the last game they played was in Atlanta, was a win. You got to find a way to win that one, honestly, if you look at it. Like sweeping the Falcons probably needs to happen. Now, if you are 6-4, then I guess you can afford a loss there in Atlanta, but then that's at San Francisco. That's home against LA. Like those aren't two teams right now I think that Carolina is necessarily going to beat at this point in time. So if you're able to beat the Falcons and you get to 6-5 or 7-4, then you're looking at 6-7, or you're looking at, I guess, yeah, it would be, because I'm trying to do the math again. It was like 6-4. Yeah. So 7-4, you lose 2, that's your 7-6. So we're looking at 6-7 or 7-6 going into your bye week. And then it's 4 games to possibly decide the division at New Orleans, home against Tampa, home against Seattle, at Tampa. I would think you got to beat the Saints again. That's a team that you need to be able to sweep. So we're looking at either 7-7 at that point in time, or looking at 8-6. And then the Tampa, Seattle games, back-to-back weeks at home, man, those are huge. I just think like right now that they got to at least get to 8. And based off of kind of how I've been going about it, like they would have already pretty much reached that threshold by beating New Orleans, or need to get one more game to do so. I don't know what Tampa's going to look like at that point in time this season. Seattle, have no idea how that's going to work out. I'm not a strong believer in Sam Darnold. I just think you got to split one with Tampa, and that maybe gets you to 9. And then if you beat Seattle, that's possibly 10. So I just think right now, realistically, like 8, possibly 9 is where I'm at. And I'm just someone who needs to see it. I'm not going out on a limb and saying that this team is going to be a playoff team next season. I like the additions that they have made defensively. I like that Derek Brown is back, that Ashawn Robinson is going to be there rotating in. They brought in Bobby Brown III to be a run stopper. Cam Jackson, who just drafted, to also be able to do that. Turk Wharton as an interior pass rusher. I like that. The edge rusher group, there's a lot of questions. I don't know if they're going to be able to rush the passer. 2 of the guys that they're depending on have never played a snap. Another one who they just brought in, Pat Jones, hasn't really done all that much. DJ Wooden, probably the top dog in that room. He needs to be healthy, and we need to see what's going to happen there. So too many questions. Linebacker room, probably a bottom, not bottom, like a, bottom half of the NFL linebacker room that they have right now. There's a little bit of experience. I mean, there's a lot in Josie Jewell. There's some experience there in Kristen Roseboom, and then Trevin Wallace got out there last year. Like what they have as far as the starting two corners, need more depth there. And then safety, that's an incomplete room. Like, I don't know if this defense has added a ton to the point where you feel really confident that they're not going to go out there and give up a ton of points next year and force the offense to go out there and try to win some shootouts. So I just think right now, at least get to 8. Roster is still a unfinished product. We'll know more about what it's going to look like come August, because again, some of the biggest additions that they've made in recent years have not happened until they've gotten to the end of training camp or the middle of the preseason. So we'll see how it all plays out. But that's where I'm at right now. FanDuel, according to them, 6.5 point win total, or 6.5 win total. I don't know why I keep saying point win total, but 6.5 win total, which is 7-10, 6-11. I'm giving you 8. So I'm giving you a more positive outlook, I suppose. But is it realistic? Guess we'll find out later on this fall, but appreciate the question. Liam, the Panthers with the 8th overall pick selected Tetairoa McMillan, and there's already been some Mike Evans comparison. We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. There's nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge. It's electric in the arena. And with Game Time, you can be a part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Game Time makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets. Even when demand is sky high, prices on the app actually go down as tip-off gets closer. And their last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. Game Time's all-in pricing means no surprise fees at checkout. What you see is what you pay. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, back here on this weekly Friday mailbag edition of Locked On Panthers. Now over to Dan, who says, "Hey, Julian." Hello, Dan. "I've heard a few people compare T-Mac to perennial Pro Bowler Mike Evans, and I was wondering if you could do a deep dive comparing their college stats, size, speed comparisons, and anything else you think is pertinent." Of course, I will do that, Dan. I have done that. Looking at Tetairoa McMillan's 3 seasons there in Tucson at the University of Arizona, he had 213 receptions, 3,423 yards, and 26 touchdowns in 3 seasons. Monster numbers for the All-American wide receiver there for the Wildcats. Now compare that to the 2 seasons that Mike Evans played. 1 season was a redshirt. Then he played 2 seasons with Johnny Manziel, mind you, the Heisman Trophy winner, as his quarterback those 2 years. And those were just, God, some electric seasons for A&M when Cliff Kingsbury was still the play caller. Kevin Sumlin was the head coach. That game against Bama, they won on the road, of course, but the next year, the one in College Station was just an awesome game. I remember it was the deep ball that Johnny threw and he breaks free for like a 90-yard touchdown and just a celebration. That was awesome. So just kind of got like chills thinking about how great college football can be, especially when you got 2 dynamic talents like that on a Saturday afternoon. And one of them, and Mike Evans, of course, not Johnny, who's gone on to be an outstanding player. And the hope is that that's what Carolina's getting in Tet McMillan. Now, looking at Mike Evans, his 2 seasons at A&M, 151 receptions, 2,499 yards, 17 touchdowns. Just crazy. So let's do this to better compare the 2. Let's take away Tet McMillan's freshman year, and let's just look at his last 2 seasons there with the Wildcats. 174 receptions, y'all, 2,721 yards, 18 touchdowns. So better numbers his final 2 years than what Mike Evans put up there in his 2 years playing at A&M. But both of them pretty comparable when looking at just they were unguardable, unmatched talents at the collegiate level during their time. Now, looking at their combine stats, Tet McMillan did not take part in the combine. He did have his pro day where we do have some discrepancies as far as what the stats really were. We're talking about 40 time. But looking at Mike Evans, he was 6'5", 231. Tet McMillan, 6'4", 219. So shorter and not as heavy as Mike Evans. Looking at the arms, Mike Evans, 35 and 1/8-inch arms, McMillan 31 and a half. So significantly longer arms for Mike Evans coming out compared to Tet McMillan. I'm guessing Mike Evans' arms haven't shrunk, so significantly longer arms than Tet McMillan has. Now, hands, Mike Evans 9 and 5/8, where McMillan 10. So he's got bigger hands, might not have longer arms, but bigger hands than Mike Evans. And then the NFL Network does this prospect grade, just comparing what these guys might be heading into the league. They had a 6.70 grade for Mike Evans. That equals a day one starter, which he obviously was. And then for McMillan, they give him a 6.40. That equals will become a good starter within 2 years. So may not be this upcoming season, but certainly will be next year in 2026 when they believe he'll become a good starter. And let me do this as well while we're looking at it, just to kind of compare to like Xavier Legette last year, what his prospect grade was, because that's something now on my mind. I really wonder what they gave him. And they gave him a 6.26, which says he'll eventually become an average starter, which actually I kind of agree with. So that's what those were. But like 40, that's another one to look at. Mike Evans, 4.53 40-yard dash, where Jordan Schultz of Yahoo, maybe Bleacher Report, I don't know where he's working at right now. 4.48 is what he clocked Tet McMillan. Now, this is a pro day one. This was not at the combine. These are a bunch of stopwatches. So it's not as like scientific as they do up in Indy, and certainly not as accurate as they do up in Indy. There's other reports that suggest that Tet ran a 5.4, a 5.5, a 4.54, 4.55, and a 4.57. So that is closer to what Mike Evans ran. So he's either faster than Mike Evans or just a hair slower than him. Speed is not necessarily the name of their games anyways. They're big possession receivers. Mike Evans had a 37-inch vertical jump. Do not have that stat for Tet McMillan, but they are pretty comparable. Looking back at their college stats, McMillan had a better college career just as far as his numbers and also what the need was in that offense there at Arizona the last 2 years compared to what they had at A&M during his time with Johnny Manziel. But he clearly was a top dog and got it done in a big way in the SEC. Evans slightly bigger than him, slightly longer, but smaller hands, although slightly. And in the 40s, probably the same. Vertical jump, don't know as far as McMillan goes. So prospect-wise, pretty similar. Evans was a better prospect, according to NFL.com, but still pretty comparable and high expectations. Now you look at what Mike Evans has done. He has 11 1,000-yard receiving seasons. He's also played 11 seasons in the NFL. He's going to the Hall of Fame, and it may not be very fair to compare a kid coming out of college to a Hall of Famer, which is what Mike Evans is. But we're always going to look at those who came before and try to see if those who are coming now can be what they were and have any sort of comparisons. And this would be, I think, the apt comparison, especially knowing that Dave Canales spent only 1 year. That's the one thing I wonder. Like, had Dave Canales not come from Tampa, would we be having these conversations? And I know Mike Evans loved Dave Canales, didn't love him enough to leave Tampa Bay, but he loved working with him for that, again, 1 season. So maybe we're making too much out of it, but I do understand where people are coming from. Now, looking at his rookie year in Tampa with Josh McCown and Mike Glennon as his quarterbacks, he had 68 receptions, 1,051 yards, 12 touchdowns in 15 games. Give me that with Bryce Young and Andy Dalton in week 3. Kidding, of course, but I mean, I really do think Andy should have that in his contract. He has to play week 3 every year because he balls out every week 3 that he's been here in Carolina. So there's your deep dive, Dan. Hope you enjoyed. Hope everyone else also enjoyed. Edge rusher. The Panthers moved off of one over a week ago in Jadeveon Clowney, and they're going young, but yet there's still people out there who are wondering, are the Panthers going to trade for one? Talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. All right, back here on Locked On Panthers. Final two questions on this weekly Friday mailbag edition of the show. Again, either at me or DM me on Twitter or at me on Blue Sky at Julian Council to get those questions in for next week's edition of the show, a Memorial Day weekend edition of the show. Headed to the Crystal Coast. Hope to see some of y'all out there if you're headed out of town next Memorial Day. And looks like we're going to have nice weather. Knock on wood. Tyler and Brian both have pretty similar questions about potentially trading for an edge rusher. Tyler asking, what are your thoughts on the Panthers being a potential landing spot if the Giants trade Kayvon Thibodeaux? They have Abdul Carter and Brian Burns, which should be more than they need. Thibodeaux is also coming off an injury, which leads me to believe he will be dealt to another team. Brian says, I hate to beat a dead horse, but with the ongoing Trey Hendrickson contract negotiation problems that has recently escalated negatively for the Bengals, should or could the Panthers entertain a trade at what could be a significant discount by the Bengals just to get rid of the negative attention? I don't think the Bengals are just going to get rid of Trey Hendrickson just because, like, oh, everyone's being mean and saying bad things about us. I don't think that would be their thought process, but we'll see how it plays out. The Thibodeaux one, I mean, do we not just see the Eagles win the Super Bowl with a bunch of pass rushers? So why on earth would the Giants, when they still have, they got a guy on a rookie deal, a guy who's getting paid some of the biggest contract at edge, Brian Burns, and then I think Thibodeau's still on his rookie deal as well. Like, why would they trade him now? That doesn't make any sense to me. Like, if this is a team that's like in a win or get out of town year for the head coach and the general manager, that being Daboll and Joe Shane, I don't understand. Like, the more the merrier when it comes to an edge rusher. So I haven't seen anything that suggests Kayvon Thibodeaux is not going to be a Giant this upcoming season. I don't think that makes sense for them. And it's always something I bring up when people ask me these questions. Does it make sense for the Giants? And right now, I don't think it makes sense for the Giants. If they lose him in free agency, they lose him in free agency. It's not like the transfer market in soccer where you can't have guys leave on a free. That happens all the time in the NFL. So we'll see, but I don't think that's realistic right now. And then the Hendrickson thing, I mean, we've talked about this earlier this offseason. Is he a scheme fit? I mean, Mike Kay came on and said he's not. He's not what they run. He's not a hand in the dirt. He's a hand in the dirt kind of guy. That's not really what they ask of their edge rushers here in Carolina. And I just have a hard time believing that this is not going to get worked out in Cincinnati. I was surprised that he talked about it got personal, I guess, between him and Zach Taylor, whatever text he received this past week, which led him to go out there and speak to the media, and he's not going to show up. And someone was trying to tell me, I think last night, my buddy who's a Bengals fan, being like, oh, they said they're going to find him. It's like, they can't find him. It's a voluntary portion of the offseason. If he decides to not show up for mandatory minicamp those 3 days, that's like not that much money anyways. It's like $600,000. The guy's rich. He's going to be fine. So Hendrickson can let this play out as long as he wants. I'm waiting for Joe Burrow to step in. I'm waiting for Jamar Chase to step in because, like, Joe was a big part of Jamar and T getting paid. And T was also smart that he got the same agent as Jamar because he went up, that agent said, you want both of them. We need to get this deal done. So maybe Trey Hendrickson should go get T Higgins and Jamar Chase's agent and get that situation settled. But the Bengals, they're always going to be trying to win with Joe. They got the receivers back. They added more guys to that defense to come back than I thought they were going to do this offseason. So I don't know. But I just personally think that people, and maybe this is not what you're doing, but it kind of feels like it, they've got to stop obsessing over trading for a big fish edge rusher. You look at Myles Garrett, there was no ties to Carolina at all. There's been no ties to Trey Hendrickson. Like, they have not been linked to any of these guys this offseason. Hell, Cooper Kupp, they weren't linked to him. And there hasn't really been that much concrete reporting about them even being linked to DK Metcalf, who ended up in Pittsburgh. So it seems to me that they've been just focused on the plan of getting free agents and focusing on the draft. And they just took two guys at the edge rusher spot on day 2 in Nick Scorton and Princely McMillan, who they clearly feel like fit the scheme and the direction that they want this room to go in, which is younger. Hendrickson's only 30. He turned 31, I think, in December. So he's a younger guy than Jadeveon Clowney, but he's not necessarily a guy who's played in this scheme like Jadeveon Clowney, but he's obviously a much better player than Clowney has been in his career. I just don't think that that's something that Carolina's focused on right now. They're focused on the young guys that they got in there and then focused on the other holes they have on the roster. Corner, maybe they add another guy there who can be a nice depth piece. That's experience for them. Safety, certainly. I think they need to add a starter in that secondary room at safety. So that's where they should be focused on, not trading assets for Trey Hendrickson or Kayvon Thibodeaux. They just brought in 2 young guys, got rid of one to open up space. I don't think to acquire a big money guy, but probably to go fill some of the other holes that are on the roster right now. So I just think personally, y'all just take a deep breath. I'm not saying that you're not calm, but just appreciate what you have on the roster right now. All right. That's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast by our Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe, follow the show free over on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, over on Twitter and Blue Sky at Julian Council, where on Friday, next week, I'm back answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions, either at me or DM me. Get those questions in to me on Twitter or at me on Blue Sky to get those questions in as well. In the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding, and I will talk to y'all on Monday.